I have with us Dr. Ravindra Utgikar. Dr. Utgikar is a electronics and communication engineer. Well, I do forget, so better to write and read. So he's an electronics and telecommunication engineer. He's doctorate in international marketing strategies from Pune University. And then he had been in industry for 3 decades. He had been in energy, automation, instrumentation, process control. He had been with Honeywell. He has been with Suzlon, the wind energy company, and Praj. Now he is with Praj. He has of course traveled to many countries for the biomass business, about 40 countries. And now he is with Praj, and he is working on bio-related business of Praj. So that is Dr. Ravindra Utgikar. Let's welcome him. Oh, sorry, Ravindra Utgikar. Yeah. Let me ask Dr. Ravindra to give a brief opening on, say, Praj or bio role in this energy transition, the problem of clean. Please, Ravindra.
Okay, good afternoon. So, Professor Kedare, thank you so much for this generous introduction. Professor Goody, my friend Ravi Shankar, entire team, sincere compliments for this wonderful conference on CSR. Always look forward to being here on the campus. We at Praj have a long-standing association. I will structure my opening remarks by connecting dots that Professor Kedare put on the table. To start with, he talked about climate change. This is one problem that is threatening the entire ecology, and data analytics show that the climate calamities in past 2 decades have significantly risen than the previous 2 decades, whether it is cold climate, extreme weather in terms of heat waves, monsoons, untimely rains, flood, and whatnot. So it's one problem that is gaining the attention of the world, and we saw that in the COP26 summit in Glasgow, Race to Zero campaign was launched, and nations and even corporates have announced carbon neutrality targets. So the momentum is gaining. So that was the first point I think he made on the climate change. The second point he made was on energy transition, how energy transition is being seen as a sustainable climate action. And energy transition hasn't remained a matter of choice, but it's an obligation. Everywhere there are calls to reduce the carbon footprint, to minimize the uses of energy. And this is being seen as a little bit unfair to the developing world, where the per capita energy consumption is still significantly lower than what we see in the developed economies. Clearly, this energy transition is something that is seen as a transition from hydrocarbon-based energy sources to carbohydrate-based energy sources. And bioenergy there is emerging as one of the very promising alternative for the sustainable development. And the technology that is making increasingly the projects, bioenergy projects, viable is the way to look forward. So in this discussion, we are going to see how the climate change, energy transition as a sustainable climate action, and bioenergy or biofuels as an important social, economic, environmental, and energy growth enabler for the nation is redefining the energy mix of our nation, and also trying to make an inclusive development, especially that in a rural part of India, in the farming community, by creating job opportunities while driving down the greenhouse gas footprints, because the very nature of bioenergy is such that on one hand, the plants absorb carbon dioxide for photosynthesis, and on the other hand, the products or goods made out of the bioroot emit carbon dioxide when consumed. So what we are seeing here is a low carbon or a carbon neutral cycle, which is where the bioeconomy is being headed, whether it is the biofuels or biomaterials. And we are seeing that the government has increasing focus on tapping the captive energy sources to become self-reliant. And we have heard Prime Minister give a carbon neutrality target of 2070, yet he has also tabled a Panchamrit agenda, which is a 5-point agenda driving the roadmap towards carbon neutrality. And we are already seeing the movement towards energy independent India by 2047. And in that regard, we are seeing bioenergy making increasingly impact because mainly it is acting as an inclusive growth driver for the rural economy, and it will help in many ways. During the course of our discussion, we'll talk a few things more about it. But thanks yet again for inviting me to be on this panel. The discussion since the morning have been very, very engaging, and there is a lot I think all of us can take away from it and further percolate down the system. Thanks.
So maybe I'll ask Ravi whether there are 2-3 things. This centralized versus decentralized. Because bioenergy is a decentralized energy. So how do you see? Do you think it will be centralized? See, what Chetan has said is, okay, we should reduce the energy. So we have to do the social transition. But till then, we have to take care of reducing the emissions, and maybe biomass can come in. That's the placing I have in my mind. There are other comments also, but let me ask Ravi whether this centralized or decentralized, how the biomass should be used, that is one thing. And the other thing is there a conflict? Because biomass, I don't see a biomass lying around, it's being used. So why won't there be a conflict?
Okay, thanks. I think these are two great questions. So it is not a question of this or that. It is this and that, because India is energy deficient, and we need all kind of energy sources to be able to fulfill our needs. Before that, let me step back and say that every country is leveraging the resources that they have to the fullest. India is blessed with sun, land, and agriculture, so we must leverage these resources. And that's where the biomass comes in. In a decentralized model, the consumption and generation points are just next to each other, so that's a preferred model. You know, in a rural economy where farmers after harvesting can actually give the agricultural waste or bio waste to actually produce bioenergy in the form of compressed biogas or even bioethanol, and use that to run their tractors and vehicles, actually in the process create an employment, an ecosystem of biomass handling, the fuel for running their tractors and setup, and actually have an entrepreneurship and employment opportunity. So it's a self-sustaining, decentralized model that's ideal, because then that will also result in stopping the rural to urban migration, and which is very important because we need inclusive growth, and this is a CSR conclave. So in that sense, the bioenergy, harnessing bioenergy and mainstreaming bioeconomy is important for India's sustainable and inclusive growth also. So decentralized models are also very welcome, point number one. Point number two, can centralized model also work? Absolutely. Because then, just like what we saw in Amul, the milk cooperative movement of milk producers happened, there could be a FPO, Farmers Producers Organization, which can actually on a sustained basis can supply because India there are a lot of marginal farmers. So probably there has to be a channel or an ecosystem that can be developed so that they can actually contribute by way of their agricultural waste or a biomass and actually feed to a centralized large-scale bioplant. And we have one such integrated biorefinery coming up at Panipat, being set up by Indian Oil Corporation based on lignocellulose, rice straw, as a feedstock. So that's also an excellent example as to how the centralized model can work, how the decentralized model can work. Quickly coming to the second point that you mentioned, that is about whether there is a conflict. So this so-called food versus fuel debate has been there forever. But then, you know, what we are saying is there is a first generation of feedstock, which is sugary feedstock. So you are actually using the molasses or the waste or the byproduct of sugarcane. Actually, Sugar industry itself has a glut situation. It's in a terrible imbalance of demand supply. Everywhere the sugar consumption is going down. So the government is actually encouraging the direct sugar cane or sugar juice to be converted to bioethanol. So we are actually getting into a zone where the sugar cane will also be seen as an energy crop. So that's for the sugary feedstock. Then there is a starchy or grain-based feedstock, which is actually a damaged or surplus grain, because India is a net positive in grain production and we don't have space to store the excess grains. They're rotting, they're going absolutely as waste. So the government in their 2018 biofuels policy opened damaged and surplus grain as a feedstock for production of bioethanol. So there is again no conflicting situation. And the third most important point is the agricultural waste or lignocellulosic feedstock, which otherwise is burned. And you talked about the Delhi situation where they are actually burning the agri residue, and that is causing the brown clouding and a big pollution. So there, all this agricultural waste can actually be converted into renewable compressed biogas. So you talked about diesel and compressed natural gas. We are now having kits which run on diesel and compressed biogas. So which is actually helping a carbon neutrality. So there are lots of opportunities. So the quick recap is centralized or decentralized, both are welcome. Any whichever form it comes, it's welcome. Decentralized is a self-sustaining model, so which is more beneficial. Whether there is conflict of food versus fuel or other application, there is absolutely no conflict. In fact, that agri-waste gives farmers an opportunity to have additional revenue stream, additional employment opportunities, additional entrepreneurial opportunities. So there is no conflict whatsoever. And at Praj, we have these technology solutions which allow both centralized as well as decentralized model. In the process, help uplift the quality of life or standard of living in the bottom section of the society's pyramid by creating job and employment opportunities. So CSR, technology-led CSR is one excellent example coming in the form of bioeconomy or the bioenergy.
So it was a very interesting discussion on energy. So I have a question. Lot of the panelists talk about various mix of energy, but nobody talk into much or into techno-economic aspect. I think Professor Singh said, in nuclear, the cost of installation and initial capital cost is huge. Similarly, in hydrogen and all these, do we have in India the technology to scale up to really address all these energy needs?
No question about the fact that economics has to work. But if these technologies, renewable energy especially, is coming as a savior to save you from the evils of climate change, it's very myopic to look at the energy generation from renewable sources in pure cost economic terms. What is the cost of climate calamities? What's the cost of climate change? Trillions of dollars are lost in one flood, one earthquake. And there are several studies that show that the cost of climate calamities is in multiple trillions of dollars. So, and everybody knows that the journey from the innovation to commercialization is a long one. So some point in time, the economies of scale or the volumes need to pick up. That tipping point has to come. I have worked in wind, I have worked in solar. Now it's coming in biomass because favorable policies often have a role to play. And all this dialogue at COP summits is about the cost of technology, green technologies, cost of clean technologies, and cost of subsidizing the climate change or the climate calamity. So I think this is a PhD level topic and can't be answered straight away.
Well, thank you so much for this lively and an engaging session.